Almost 400 migrants were rescued off the coast of the Canary Islands, according to local authorities. The European Investment Bank announced hundreds of millions of euro in new financial support for Ukraine's recovery and development.
Following the results of Kosovo's parliamentary election, multiple challenges are ahead for the country's next government.
On the sidelines of the Artificial Intelligence Summit in Paris, the military community gathered to discuss how AI is impacting conflicts around the world. Hundreds of migrants were rescued off the coast of the Canary Islands. Most of the 389 migrants were men, but there were also 46 women and 5 minors on board, according to local authorities. 5 of the rescued boats were heading to Lanzarote, while 2 were heading to the island of El Hierro. More than 43,000 migrants arrived to the Canary Islands in 2024, a record-breaking figure. Last year, European politics took a turn to the right, particularly after EU elections in June. As such, many EU member states have started to update their migration policies, just as migration also comes to the top of the European Council's agenda. In a letter to EU member states, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen proposed speeding up the return of asylum seekers and opening detention centres in third countries. The European Union's lending arm announced hundreds of millions of euro in new financial support for Ukraine's recovery and development. Additionally, nearly 500 million euro will be channeled through major Ukrainian banks to support small and medium-sized enterprises, including those operating near the front lines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European Investment Bank President Nadia Calvino held a joint conference in Kyiv following their discussions on support for Ukraine.
Ukraine is obviously our top priority right now. Our commitment to Ukraine is unwavering, and the European Investment Bank is one of the main, if not the main, investment partner to the country right now. We have accelerated the deployment of these projects on the ground, and I'm happy that today we have been able to sign agreements to mobilize around 1 billion euros in investment.
Zelensky also discussed meeting with members of the Trump administration before an upcoming conference on international security.
Ми на цьому тижні будуть деякі люди із команди президента Трампа серйозні у нас в Україні до ще Мюнхенської конференції. Потім буде Мюнхенська конференція, у мене буде там ряд зустрічей із віце-президентом. Також будуть зустрічі із командою президента Трампа.
Trump's national security advisor said that representatives will meet with European officials this week about how to end the war in Ukraine.
Russia launched a wave of overnight drone attacks on several Ukrainian cities, including the capital Kyiv, as well as cities in the Donetsk and Sumy regions. The armed forces of Ukraine said the Russian army launched 83 drones. One of those struck near a high-rise building in a residential area in Sumy, damaging several houses and dozens of vehicles. 65 residents were evacuated and 1 woman was injured. No casualties were reported.
Було дуже жорстко. Я думала, що нам кінець. Я считала 3, 2, 1. Зараз, мабуть, все. Різко, страшно. Все було світле, окна задрожали, все задрожало. Було таке почуття, наче дім піднявся отак от.
In the Donetsk region, at least 5 people were injured in the shelling of a residential neighborhood in Kostiantynivka. And in Kramatorsk, 1 person was killed and 9 injured after an aerial bomb struck the city.
Втрачено деяку техніку, втрачено в оглядовому кабінеті жіночому оглядовому, втрачено освітлювальне обладнання і втрачено деякі компоненти. На щастя, більшість вдалося врятувати.
Also, Kyiv was struck where a drone attack sparked a fire in a non-residential building. The mayor reported no injuries. Meanwhile, in Russia, authorities said debris of a Ukrainian drone damaged the roof of a 19-story residential complex in Krasnodar. They reported no injuries or casualties.
Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti's left-wing party won most seats in this weekend's parliamentary election. But his new term will face multiple challenges, including the revival of talks on normalizing relations with Serbia, a key issue in repairing ties with the EU and US.
Trump administration, they did not still make any statement about the dialogue, whether they want to engage or not, or to support it or not. And the EU has led the process in a way which was not at all convincing, let's say, to the parties. No Belgrade, no Pristina ever believes that EU is firm, that it will provide any stick or carrot to incentivize parties to engage constructively in dialogue.
Kurti is also under pressure to increase public salaries and pensions, improve education and health services, and fight poverty. Left without a majority in the House, Kurti's party will have to look for an ally to form the next government.
The lack of a clear majority in Pristina and the divisions among the United States and the European Union on how to deal with the tension in the Western Balkans seems to create a very difficult perspective when it comes to reestablish a dialogue between Pristina, Belgrade and the Serbian community of Kosovo.
Romania's President Klaus Iohannis announced his resignation on Monday, 2 months after a top court annulled the country's presidential election. Following the resignation, demonstrators doubled down on their demands. Iohannis had served 2 5-year terms, but his presidency was extended in December.
Pentru a scuti România și pe cetățenii români de această criză, de această evoluție inutilă și negativă, demisionez din funcția de președinte al României.
The demonstrations against him continued in Bucharest after the announcement.
Turul 2 înapoi și altceva să plece oții din guvern, că altceva nu vrem.
Pentru libertate, pentru adevărata democrație.
Romania plunged into turmoil after Calin Georgescu, a far-right ultra-nationalist, won the first round of the country's presidential election, only for allegations of electoral violations and Russian interference to emerge.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have...
U.S. President Donald Trump said that the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas should be cancelled if Hamas doesn't release all the remaining hostages by midday on Saturday. The militant group accused Israel of not holding up its end of the deal and said the delay served as a warning signal, giving mediators 5 days to pressure Israel to act.
Well, I would say this, and I'm going to let that because that's Israel's decision, but as far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out.
When a reporter asked if he would consider withholding aid from Jordan and Egypt if they don't agree to take in Palestinians, Trump said he would.
Yeah, maybe. Sure. Why not? I mean, if they don't agree, I would conceivably withhold aid, yeah.
Trump's latest comment comes shortly after he doubled down on his plan to buy Gaza, which drew international backlash.
A Hamas spokesperson said the next release of Israeli hostages will be delayed, accusing Israel of repeatedly violating the ceasefire agreement. The next exchange, scheduled for Saturday, called for 3 more Israeli hostages to be freed in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Hamas says the Israeli military has targeted Palestinians with shelling and gunfire and failed to facilitate the entry of humanitarian aid as agreed. Israel's defense minister Israel Katz responded by saying the delay itself was a violation of the ceasefire agreement and instructed the Israeli military to be on high alert. Another Israeli official said Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pushed forward a meeting with the security cabinet to Tuesday morning. The Hostages and Missing Family Forum, which represents many of the hostage families, called on mediating countries to restore the existing deal.
On the sidelines of the Artificial Intelligence Summit in Paris, the military community gathered to discuss how AI is impacting conflicts around the world. President Macron has been urging France and the EU to step up their AI efforts, especially within the defence field. But one of the main obstacles to increased EU cooperation is data. To be effective, algorithms require many sets of different kinds of data, some of which arms producers are reluctant to share.
Il y a probablement une difficulté, mais ce n'est pas uniquement en France ou en Europe, hein, c'est l'accès aux données, puisqu'on est sur des données classifiées, des données très compliquées, et sur des données souveraines, évidemment, on ne peut pas les partager comme on voudrait.
A NATO commander said today's conflict, such as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, demonstrate that alliance members don't have a choice but to keep up with the pace.
So the ability to adapt to a course of action, enemy course of action, is really important. You see that in Ukraine. So it's a matter of, it's a question of life. If you do not adapt at speed and at scale, then you die. Pour le côté allié, c'est l'interopérabilité, de faire que les 32 alliés puissent travailler ensemble avec une confiance dans les données, dans leur utilisation, avec des règles d'engagement qui sont comprises par tous, et puis que les flux de données qui sont agrégés, qui sont produits par les différents alliés puissent se mélanger, en fait, puissent pouvoir participer à la même situation.
The summit is already creating EU military cooperation. Helsing, a German-based company specialized in defense, teamed up with Mistral AI, a French AI startup, to develop next-generation AI systems for EU defense.